My parents knew my brother had stolen from my business for 3 years. They told me, keep the peace. Can you even imagine finding out your own parents knew your brother was systematically stealing from you for 3 years, and their only advice was to keep the peace? Well, that was my life. I kept it until Thanksgiving dinner, when I completely blew it all up. And what happened next? Honestly, you just won't believe it. Look, I need to get this off my chest, and it's still tough to talk about. My brother, Garrett, he didn't just borrow money from me once. This wasn't some impulsive mistake he regretted. He stole from my business, systematically, for 3 long years. And when I finally uncovered the truth, my parents, the people who raised me, they told me to just keep the peace. So I did, right up until I absolutely couldn't anymore. My name's Spencer. I'm 34, and I live in Central Ohio. I own an HVAC company called Aldrich Comfort Systems. I started it when I was 27, with a beat-up used work van, a credit card I probably shouldn't have opened, and about 9 years of experience crawling through attics and basements. I'm not saying this to brag, but it's crucial you understand. I built this thing with my bare hands. Nobody handed it to me. By the time I was 30, the company had 12 employees, 3 trucks, and solid commercial contracts. At 32, we were pulling in just under $2 million a year in revenue. Not get-rich-quick money, especially when you factor in payroll, insurance, equipment, and the 4 hours of sleep I averaged for about 3 straight years. But it was real money. Enough that I could breathe. Enough that people in my family started to pay attention. My parents are Don and Cheryl. Dad was an electrician for 35 years. Mom a school secretary. Good people, mostly. But they have this blind spot, a blind spot the size of Lake Erie, and its name is Garrett. My brother is 3 years older than me. He's the type who walks into a room and immediately finds whoever's in charge, so he can shake their hand. A good talker, always has been. Growing up, Garrett was a son who always had the benefit of the doubt. If we both came home late, I got grounded, and Garrett got asked if everything was okay. If we both needed money, Garrett's request was reasonable, and mine meant I wasn't responsible enough. My mom would say things like, Garrett's more sensitive, or Garrett needs more support. And after a while, I just stopped keeping score. I figured out early that the fastest way to get what I wanted was to go get it myself. Garrett worked in pharmaceutical sales for about a decade, did fine, then got let go during a restructure when he was 32. He told everyone it was politics. Maybe it was. I never push him on it. What I did do was offer him a job. Look, I know what you're thinking. And yeah, in hindsight, hiring family was a mistake that started all of this. But at the time, it made sense. Garrett needed work. I desperately needed someone to handle scheduling, invoicing, and client communications so I could stop doing everything myself. He had sales experience. He knew how to talk to people. And my mom called me 6 times in 2 weeks, telling me how stressed Garrett was, how Megan was worried about their mortgage, how their daughter Lily had just started at a private school they probably couldn't afford anymore. So I hired him as office manager. Salary plus a small bonus structure tied to customer retention. A fair deal. Better than fair, actually, considering he had 0 HVAC experience. I set him up at the desk closest to the front door, so he'd be the first face client saw. Bought him a new computer. Walked him through our scheduling software. Garrett picked it up fast. I'll give him that. Within a month. He had the daily dispatch running smoother than it ever had under me, mostly because I was always getting pulled to job sites and letting callbacks pile up. My mom called me after Garrett's first week and said, "See? I knew you two would be great together. He's always looked up to you, Spencer." Which was a strange thing to say about a 35-year-old man, but that's my mom. For the first year or so, things were fine. Garrett showed up on time, handled the phones well, and clients liked him. My lead foreman, Hector, told me once that Garrett was a little too smooth, but that he got the job done. I took that as a compliment on Garrett's behalf. Hector's a former Marine who thinks anyone who doesn't smell like sheet metal by noon is suspicious. The problem started small. Or maybe they were always there, and I just wasn't looking. Around year 2, I noticed our margins on supply costs were tighter than they should have been. We were doing more jobs, but somehow spending more per job on materials. I mentioned it to Garrett, and he said our main distributor had raised prices. That tracked. Lumber, copper, refrigerant, everything in the trades was going up. I didn't dig deeper. Then Hector came to me one afternoon in the shop. He had a clipboard, which meant he was serious. Hector only uses clipboards when he's about to say something he's been thinking about for a while. "You ever heard of Ridgeway Solutions?" he asked. I told him no. "They've been on our vendor list for about 14 months, he said, flipping a page. I pulled the invoices because I was trying to reconcile a parts order that came in short. Ridgeway's billed us for consulting services, equipment sourcing, and something called operational logistics support. I asked him how much. He flipped another page on the clipboard. Just north of $58,000 since they first showed up. I felt this weird calm settle over me. Not the good kind. The kind where your brain is moving faster than your body, and you just go still. Who approved the invoices? I asked. Hector looked at me like I already knew the answer. Garrett processes all vendor payments. You gave him that authority 2 years ago. He was right. I had. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and pulled up everything I could find on Ridgeway Solutions. The LLC was registered in the state about 3 years prior. The registered address was a UPS mailbox location 20 minutes from our office. There was no website, no phone number, no reviews, no digital footprint at all beyond the state filing. And the invoices themselves were just vague enough to slide past a busy owner who trusted his office manager. Consulting services for $1,200. Equipment sourcing fee $3,800. Operational logistics support $2,600. All just under the threshold where I would have personally reviewed them. I pulled up the state business registry and searched Ridgeway Solutions. The filing listed a registered agent I didn't recognize, but the member listed on the LLC operating agreement was a name I knew very well. Garrett Aldrich. My brother had created a fake company and had been billing my business for services that didn't exist. For 3 years. I closed my laptop, sat in my kitchen for about 20 minutes without moving, and then I did something that surprises people when I tell them. Nothing. I did absolutely nothing. Not yet. I want to be clear about something. When I say I did nothing, I don't mean I went into denial. I mean I made a decision. I was going to be smart about this. Not fast. The next morning, I went to work like normal. Garrett was already at his desk when I walked in, coffee in hand, scrolling through the schedule on his monitor. He looked up and said, "Morning. Got a callback request from that dentist office on 5th Street. Want me to send Hector's crew, or the new guys?" "Hector's crew," I said. "They know the building." And that was it. Normal conversation, normal day. I watched him work for about an hour from my office. And I'll tell you what bothered me more than the theft itself. He didn't look guilty, not even a little. He was whistling, actual whistling, like a guy who sleeps fine at night. I spent the next week pulling records quietly after hours. I'd wait until everyone left, lock the office door, and go through our accounting software line by line. Every Ridgeway invoice followed the same pattern, always between $2,000 and $5,500. Always categorized under consulting or sourcing. Always approved by Garrett. Always paid via a transfer to an account I didn't have access to. Over 3 years, the total came to just over $210,000. Let that sit for a second. $210,000. That's not borrowing money from the register. That's systematic fraud against your own brother's company. I called my divorce attorney, Marcus, not because this was a divorce issue, but because Marcus was the only lawyer I truly trusted. He listened to the whole thing, asked me 3 questions, and said, "You need a forensic accountant, and you need a business litigation attorney. I know both. Don't confront anyone until you've talked to them." So I didn't. But here's where I made my one mistake in this whole thing, and I'll own it. Before I got the professionals involved, I called my parents. I don't know what I was expecting. Support, maybe, or outrage on my behalf. My dad had been an electrician for 35 years. He understood what it meant to build something with your hands. My mom had always told us growing up that honesty was the one thing she would negotiate on. I figure if anyone would be horrified by what Garrett had done, it would be them. I drove to their house on a Sunday. My dad was in the garage, organizing his workbench, which is what he does when he's avoiding my mom. I found her inside, making a grocery list at the kitchen counter. I sat them both down at the dining table and told them everything. The fake LLC, the invoices, the $210,000. I had printouts. I laid them out like I was giving presentation because, honestly, I thought they might not believe me without proof. My mom looked at the papers for about 30 seconds. Then she looked at my dad, and my dad did this thing where he rubbed the back of his neck and stared at the table. Spencer, my mom said, "We know?" The room got very, very quiet. "What do you mean, you know?" My dad finally spoke. Garrett told us about a year and a half ago. He'd had a few drinks at the 4th of July barbecue, and he started going on about how he'd figured out a way to get what he was worth from the company. My mom folded her hands. "Your mom and I talked about it after, and we decided it wasn't our place to get involved. You boys are adults. We didn't want to take sides." I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of it just hit me like a physical blow. He stole $210,000 from me. You knew about it, and your decision was to not take sides? Spencer, you have to understand, my mom said, and I swear her voice had that tone she used when I was 12, and she was explaining why Garrett got the bigger bedroom. Your brother has had a harder road than you. The layoff destroyed his confidence. Megan's been struggling. Lily's school costs a fortune, and your business is doing well. You're comfortable. So, because I'm doing okay, it's fine that he steals from me? Nobody's saying it's fine. We're saying maybe you could look at it as helping your family. He didn't ask for help. He created a fake company and submitted fraudulent invoices. That's not asking for help. Mom, that's a felony. My dad put his hand up. Let's everybody calm down. Spencer, your mother and I aren't defending what Garrett did. We're just asking you to think about the family. If you go after him on this, it'll tear everything apart. It's already apart, Dad. You just decided not to tell me. I left their house and sat in my truck in the driveway for about 10 minutes. I was angry, obviously, but more than angry, I was recalibrating because the situation had just changed. It wasn't Spencer versus Garrett anymore. It was Spencer versus his entire family. The forensic accountant my attorney referred me to was a woman named Dana Park. She was small, quiet, and absolutely terrifying the way that people who are very good with numbers can be. I gave her access to our books, and within 2 weeks, she had a full report. Every Ridgeway invoice, every payment, every corresponding deposit in an account that traced back to Garrett through the LLC. And then Dana found something I hadn't expected. The registered agent on the Ridgeway LLC, she said during our second meeting. I pulled the original filing from the state. The agent is listed as someone named Patricia Caldwell. That's a known alias service, basically a placeholder. But the LLC operating agreement required a co-signer for the initial filing because the registered agent was a service, not a person. She slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a notarized signature page. The co-signer was Cheryl Aldrich, my mother. My mom didn't just know about the theft. She helped set it up. I sat there looking at that signature for a long time. Dana was professional enough not to say anything. She just waited. Finally, I asked, "What does this mean legally?" "It means your mother could potentially be considered a party to the fraud. At minimum, she had knowledge of the LLC's purpose and provided material assistance in its creation. Whether a prosecutor would pursue that is a different question, but in a civil action, it's significant leverage." Leverage. That word stuck with me all the way home because that's what this was going to come down to. Not anger, not revenge. Leverage. I went home that night and started planning. Not what I was going to say, but what I was going to do. For the next 2 months, I was the best brother in the world. I showed up to Sunday dinners. I brought wine. I asked Garrett about Lily's soccer games and nodded while Megan talked about their kitchen renovation. The one I now knew was funded with my money. I complimented the new countertops. Quartz. Very nice. Meanwhile, I was dismantling Garrett's access to my company piece by piece, and he had no idea. The first thing I did was hire a business litigation attorney named Frank Castellano. Frank was in his 60s, wore suspenders without irony, and had the energy of a man who genuinely enjoyed making people uncomfortable in depositions. When I laid everything out for him, the forensic accountant's report, the LLC filing with my mom's signature, the full invoice history, he leaned back in his chair and said, "This is clean. This is very clean fraud, which means it's very easy to prove." Frank's advice was straightforward. You have two paths: criminal referral to the county prosecutor or civil action for recovery of the stolen funds, or both. But before you decide, lock down your business so he can't do any more damage, and document everything from this point forward. So that's what I did. Step 1 was the accounting system. I worked with Dana Park to migrate our books to a new platform. I told Garrett the old software was being discontinued, which was partially true since they had announced an end-of-life date 18 months out. The new system required role-based permissions. Garrett got read access to scheduling and client contacts. Payment processing, vendor management, and bank account access went exclusively to me and to our new part-time bookkeeper, a retired accountant named Donna, who Dana had recommended. Garrett didn't push back. He just said, "Makes sense. I've got enough on my plate with scheduling anyway." Step 2 was the bank accounts. I opened new operating accounts at a different bank and migrated all incoming payments over a 30-day period. The old account stayed open with minimal balances, so nothing looked abrupt. The ACH routing for Ridgeway's invoices now pointed to an account with essentially nothing in it. If Garrett submitted another fake invoice, it would bounce, and I'd have one more documented attempt. He did, by the way, 2 weeks after the migration. A Ridgeway invoice for $3,400 showed up in the old system. It failed to process. Garrett never mentioned it to me. I saved the failed transaction record. Step 3 was Hector. I told Hector everything on a Tuesday evening after the crews had gone home. We sat in the shop bay with the overhead door open, drinking coffee out of those terrible styrofoam cups from the gas station on Route 40. Hector listened without interrupting. When I finished, he set his coffee down and said, "I'm going to ask you one question, and I want a straight answer." "Go ahead. Are you going to handle this, or are you going to let your family talk you out of it?" "I'm going to handle it." He nodded. "Good. What do you need from me?" What I needed from Hector was his ears. I asked him to document any conversations where Garrett made claims about his role in the company that weren't accurate. I told him not to provoke anything, just to pay attention and write it down. Within 3 weeks, Hector had a list, and it was worse than I'd expected. Garrett had been telling clients he was a co-owner of Aldrich Comfort Systems. Not an employee, not the office manager, a co-owner. He'd said it to at least 4 commercial clients that Hector could confirm, including our biggest contract, a property management company that handled 36 rental units. When Hector told me, I called Frank immediately. Frank got quiet on the phone, which I'd learned meant he was either thinking or furious. "That's not just dishonest," Frank said. "That's a potential liability issue. If a client enters a contract believing Garrett has ownership authority and something goes wrong, you could be exposed. We need to send corrective letters to every client he's spoken to, but not yet. Not until you're ready to move." So I added it to the file. The file was getting thick. Here's the thing about living a double life, even a justified one. It wears on you. Every Sunday dinner, I'd sit across from Garrett and watch him pour my dad a beer and make my mom laugh with some story about Lily's school play. And I'd think about the $210,000, about my mother's signature, about the property management company that thought my brother owned half my business. And I'd smile and pass the rolls. Thanksgiving was 3 weeks away. I'd already decided that was the day, not because I'm dramatic, but because it was the one time the entire family would be in one room, and I was done having this conversation in pieces. But Garrett nearly forced my hand early. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I was at my parents' house dropping off a space heater my mom had asked for. Their old one had died, and she'd mentioned it twice, which in my mother's language meant she expected someone to handle it. I brought a good one from our warehouse, a commercial-grade unit we kept for job sites. I came in through the garage. My dad was in the living room watching a game. I could hear Garrett and my mom talking in the kitchen. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. The house is small, and Garrett's voice carries. It's basically official, Garrett was saying. Spencer and I have been talking about it, and he's going to announce it at Thanksgiving. He's making me a full partner. My mom made a sound, a happy sound. Oh, Garrett, that's wonderful. I always knew he'd come around. See, I told you, just give him time, and he'd recognize everything you've done. Yeah, Garrett said. He said he couldn't have grown the company without me. We're going to restructure the whole thing. 50-50. I stood in the hallway, holding a space heater, listening to my brother invent an alternate reality where I was grateful to the man who'd been robbing me blind. And my mother believed every word. Maybe because she wanted to. Maybe because it was easier than remembering that she'd co-signed the paperwork that made the robbery possible. I set the heater down by the hall closet, walked into the kitchen, and said, "Hey, Mom, heater's by the closet. Garrett, how's it going?" He didn't flinch, not even a little. "Hey, Spence, just telling Mom about some work stuff." "Cool," I said. "See you guys at Thanksgiving." I drove home and called Frank. "Thanksgiving," I said. "I want everything ready by Thanksgiving." Frank paused, then said, "I'll have the documents prepared. Are you sure about the venue?" "I'm sure." "Then let's go over the sequence." For the next 2 weeks, I prepared. I had the forensic accountant's complete report printed and bound. I had the LLC filing with my mother's signature. I had the corrective client letters drafted and ready to send the morning after. I had a separation agreement for Garrett's employment, and I had Frank's number on speed dial in case things went sideways. Garrett, meanwhile, spent those 2 weeks telling anyone who'd listen that big changes were coming at Aldrich Comfort Systems. He told Megan, who started talking about their company at a family dinner. He told our cousin Kevin, who congratulated me at a gas station and looked confused when I didn't know what he was talking about. The night before Thanksgiving, I sat in my kitchen with all the documents spread out on the table. I'd spent 3 years building something real. Garrett had spent 3 years hollowing out from the inside, and my parents had watched it happen and told me to keep the peace. Tomorrow, the peace was over. Thanksgiving morning, I woke up at 5 o'clock. Not because I set an alarm, but because my body decided sleep was done. I made coffee. I fed my dog, a 7-year-old lab mix named Copper, who has no opinions about family drama. I sat on the back porch in the dark and drank my coffee and ran through everything one more time. I wasn't nervous. Exactly. I was aware that in about 10 hours, I was going to change the shape of my family permanently. That's not a thing you do lightly, even when it's necessary. I called Hector at 8. He picked up on the first ring. "Today," he said. "Today. You good?" "I'm good. Call me after. I'll have a beer waiting." Thanksgiving at my parents' house follows the same script every year. Arrive by noon. My dad watches football in the living room. My mom commands a kitchen. Megan sets a table and makes a big deal about the centerpiece. Garrett pours drinks and works the room like he's hosting a charity event. I pulled into the driveway at noon. Garrett's SUV was already there. The new one, the one I had now done the math on, and was pretty sure had been partially financed by Ridgeway Solutions. My mom met me at the door. She hugged me and whispered, "I'm so happy about the partnership, Spencer. I really am." I hugged her back. "Let's talk about it later, Mom." The afternoon went exactly as expected. Turkey, sides, my dad's cornbread, which is the one thing he cooks, and he acts like it's a state secret. Garrett told 3 stories, all of which cast himself as a hero. Megan complimented my mom's gravy. Lily showed me a drawing she'd done of a horse. It was a good drawing. I told her so. We ate. The food was good. My mom does Thanksgiving better than anyone I've ever known, and I want to be fair about that even now. After dinner, we moved to the living room. Plates cleared, coffee poured, pie on the table. This was the part of the evening where my dad would doze off and everyone else would talk about nothing important. Except Garrett had other plans. He stood up with his coffee cup and clinked it with a spoon like we were at a wedding reception. "Hey, everyone, before we get too comfortable, I've got some news." My mom was beaming. My dad shifted in his recliner. Megan had this look on her face, the rehearsed surprise of someone who already knows what's about to be said. Spencer and I have been talking, and I'm proud to announce that I'm officially being made a partner at Aldrich Comfort Systems. 50-50. We're going to take this company to the next level together. Megan clapped. My mom said, "We're so proud of both of you." My dad raised his coffee cup. I sat there for exactly 4 seconds. I counted. Then I said, "Actually, before dessert, I'd like to talk about Ridgeway Solutions." The room went quiet in a specific way. Not confused quiet. Guilty quiet. At least from 2 people in the room. Garrett's smile stayed in place, but his eyes changed. "What?" "Ridgeway Solutions. The LLC you registered 3 years ago. The one you've been using to submit fake invoices to my company." "Spencer, what are you talking about?" Megan said, and I'll give her credit. She sounded genuinely confused. Later, I'd find out she knew everything, but in that moment, she played it well. "I'm talking about $210,000 in fraudulent charges billed to Aldrich Comfort Systems by a shell company that you created, Garrett. Consulting services, equipment sourcing, operational logistics support. All fake. All paid to an account you control." My dad started to stand up. "Now hold on, Spencer." "Sit down, Dad. You knew about this. You've known for 18 months. Mom told you after Garrett confessed at the 4th of July barbecue." My mom's hand went to her mouth. Not because she was shocked, but because she'd been caught. "And Mom," I said, "I know about your involvement, too. I have the LLC filing. You co-signed the registered agent paperwork. Your signature is notarized and on file with the state." That one landed. My mom's face went from composed to pale in about 2 seconds. My dad looked at her like he was seeing something for the first time, which was interesting because it suggested he didn't know about her involvement in setting up the LLC. He knew about the theft. He didn't know his wife had helped build the machine. Garrett sat down slowly. The performance was over. "Spencer, listen. I can explain." "I don't need you to explain. I've had a forensic accountant reviewing our books for 2 months. I have every invoice, every payment, every deposit into the Ridgeway account. I have the LLC operating agreement with your name and Mom's signature, and I have documentation from 4 commercial clients confirming that you've been telling people you're a co-owner of my company, which you are not and have never been." I reached into the bag I brought and set a manila folder on the coffee table. "This is a separation agreement. Effective immediately, your employment with Aldrich Comfort Systems is terminated. You have 30 days to vacate your desk." I pushed the folder across the table. "The agreement includes a structured repayment plan for the full $210,000 to be repaid over 36 months at a fair interest rate." Garrett stared at the folder like it was going to bite him. "If you sign it, this stays between us. No police, no criminal referral, no civil lawsuit. The repayment plan is manageable if you get a real job and stop living off money that doesn't belong to you. And if I don't sign it, then Monday morning, my attorney files a criminal fraud referral with the county prosecutor and a civil suit for recovery of stolen funds. Both filings will reference the Ridgeway LLC, the forged invoices, and Mom's co-signature on the formation documents. Mom becomes a named party." My mom started crying quietly. The kind of crying that's more about being caught than being sorry. My dad found his voice. "Spencer, you can't do this to your mother." "I didn't do anything to her, Dad. She co-signed paperwork for a company designed to steal from her own son. That was her choice." Garrett leaned forward. His charm was gone. What was left was something harder, meaner. "You'd really do that? You'd drag Mom into this over money? You stole $210,000 from me, Garrett. You lied to my clients. You told people you own half my company. And then tonight, you stood up in our parents' living room and announced a partnership that doesn't exist. This isn't about money. This is about the fact that everyone in this room decided I was the one who should absorb the damage, so nobody else had to be uncomfortable." Megan grabbed Garrett's arm. "Don't sign anything. He's bluffing." I looked at Megan. "I'm not bluffing. And your kitchen renovation, the boat, and Lily's tuition for the last 2 years were paid for with money stolen from my business. You might want to think about what that means for you before you start giving legal advice." Nobody spoke for a long time. The pie sat on the table untouched. My mom's centerpiece, little ceramic pilgrims holding a cornucopia, sat between us like a joke nobody was on. Garrett picked up the folder. Garrett didn't sign the agreement that night. He took the folder home. Frank had told me to expect that, and honestly, I preferred it. I didn't want a signature made under pressure at a holiday dinner. I wanted one made in the cold light of a Tuesday morning when reality had fully settled in. He signed it 4 days later. His attorney, a guy from a strip mall firm who specialized in DUI cases, reviewed the agreement and apparently told Garrett the same thing Frank had told me. The evidence was overwhelming. A criminal referral would almost certainly result in charges. The civil case was a layup, and the involvement of their mother meant the exposure wasn't limited to Garrett. Garrett drove to my house on a Monday evening, sat at my kitchen table, and signed every page. He didn't say much. When he was done, he set the pen down and said, "You know this is going to destroy the family." It was already destroyed, Garrett. You just didn't want to be the one who had to look at it. He left. I poured myself a drink and sat with Copper on the couch and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not happiness, exactly. More like the absence of weight. Like I'd been carrying a backpack full of rocks for 3 years, and someone had finally unzipped it. The next morning, I sent the corrective letters to every commercial client Garrett had spoken to. The letters were professional, brief, and clear. Spencer Aldrich was the sole owner of Aldrich Comfort Systems. No partnership had ever existed or been contemplated. Any representations to the contrary were unauthorized and inaccurate. I lost one client, the property management company. Their operations manager called me and said they were uncomfortable with the situation and were going to explore other options. It stung, but I understood. Trust is easy to lose and hard to rebuild, and Garrett had put my name on his lies. The other clients stayed. 2 of them called personally to say they appreciated the transparency. One of them, a school district facilities manager named Bill, said, "I always thought something was off about that guy. Too much cologne for an HVAC company." Garrett's last day at the office was quiet. I wasn't there for it. I asked Donna, our bookkeeper, to handle the logistics, the return of keys, the final paycheck, the removal of his access credentials. I didn't trust myself to be professional about it, and I also didn't want to give him the satisfaction of a dramatic exit. Hector told me later that Garrett showed up, packed a single box, and left without saying goodbye to anyone. The only thing he said was to ask Hector if there was any beer in the shop fridge. There wasn't. Now, here's the part people always ask about, the family. My parents tried to play peacemaker for about 6 weeks. My mom called constantly, voicemails that start with "Spencer, I know you're angry," and ended with "This isn't how I raise you boys." My dad called once, said he was disappointed in how I'd handled it, and I told him I was disappointed that it took his son getting robbed for him to have an opinion. He didn't call again for a while. I didn't cut them off entirely. That wasn't the point. The point was boundaries. I told my parents in a letter, because I needed to say it precisely, that I loved them, that I understood their instinct to protect the family image, but that their decision to hide Garrett's theft and my mother's decision to help facilitate it had broken my trust in a fundamental way, and that rebuilding it would take time and specific conditions. The conditions were these: no discussion of my business, no attempt to broker reconciliation between me and Garrett, no excuses, rationalizations, or revisionist history about what happened, and no unsupervised involvement in any aspect of my financial life. My mom resisted at first. She sent me a 4-page handwritten letter explaining that she'd only co-signed the LLC paperwork because Garrett told her it was for a legitimate side business. Maybe that was true. I don't know. But legitimate side businesses don't bill your brother's company for services they don't provide, and she knew about the billing within a year and said nothing. At some point, ignorance becomes a choice. My dad came around faster. He showed up at my house one Saturday with a 6-pack and said, "I should have told you. I was a coward about it, and I'm sorry." We drank the beer and watched the game and didn't talk about Garrett. It wasn't fixed, but it was something. Garrett and I don't speak. I don't expect we will for a long time. If ever, he's making his payments. He got a job selling commercial flooring, which is apparently close enough to pharmaceutical sales that his skills transfer. Megan, from what I hear through the family grapevine, is furious, not at Garrett for stealing, but at me for catching him. I'm at peace with that. They had to sell the boat. The first month after Thanksgiving was hard. I won't pretend it wasn't. There were nights I sat in my kitchen and second-guessed everything. Maybe I should have handled it privately. Maybe I should have given Garrett a chance to confess on his own. Maybe the Thanksgiving confrontation was cruel. But then I'd open my books and look at the $210,000 hole my brother had drilled into the company I'd built with my own hands. And I'd remember that he was never going to confess. He was going to stand up at Thanksgiving dinner and announce a fake partnership. He was going to keep taking until there was nothing left to take. And my parents were going to keep telling me it was my job to absorb it, because keeping the peace was more important than the truth. I promoted Hector to operations manager in January. He resisted at first because Hector resists anything that takes him away from job sites. But I told him I needed someone I could trust managing the day-to-day, and there was nobody I trusted more. He accepted, asked for a company truck with no dealer stickers, and immediately started reorganizing the parts inventory with the intensity of a man preparing for war. Donna stayed on as bookkeeper. Dana Park remains our forensic accountant on retainer. I implemented quarterly audits, dual signature requirements on vendor payments over $1,000, and a conflict of interest disclosure form for every employee. Things I should have had from the beginning. Things I would have had if I hadn't been so busy building the company that I forgot to protect it. By spring, the business was healthier than it had been in years. It turns out that when you stop bleeding $70,000 a year in fake invoices, your margins improve significantly. We picked up 2 new commercial contracts. I gave the crews a raise. I started sleeping through the night again. Last month, I ran into my cousin Kevin at the hardware store. He asked me how things were going. I told him, good, and the family stuff, we're working on it. He nodded. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Garrett needed somebody to tell him no about 20 years ago. Maybe, but that's not really the point. The point is that I spent 34 years being the responsible one. The one who built things, who showed up, who solved problems, who hired his brother and fed his parents' heater habit, and kept the peace at every table I was ever asked to sit at. And the reward for all that was being told to keep quiet while the people closest to me took what they wanted. So I stopped keeping quiet. And yeah, it cost me something. It cost me Sunday dinners and easy phone calls and the comfortable fiction that my family had my back. But I kept my company. I kept my integrity. And I kept Hector, who still thinks anyone who doesn't smell like sheet metal by noon is fundamentally unserious. I'm okay with that trade. So, tell me, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to choose between family peace and standing up for yourself? I really want to know what you think. Let me know in the comments below.